The lockbox sat on her counter like a threat disguised as antique beauty, and Elena Graves knew before she even touched it that this one would cost her sleep. "I've tried everything," the man standing across from her said, his voice smooth and cultured in a way that suggested private tutors and centuries-old wine cellars. "Every locksmith in the city turned me away." Elena glanced up from the ornate iron puzzle, meeting eyes so pale they were nearly silver. The stranger wore his wealth quietly tailored charcoal suit, platinum cufflinks that caught the autumn light filtering through her shop windows, but it was his stillness that unsettled her. Most people fidgeted. He stood like a marble statue come to elegant life. "And you think I'll have better luck?" She turned the box over in her hands, feeling the weight of it, the strange warmth the metal held despite the October chill. Her father had taught her to listen to locks, to feel their secrets through her fingertips. This one hummed with something old and deliberate. "I think," he said, and the faintest hint of amusement touched his lips, "that you're Mikhail Graves's daughter. That makes you the only locksmith in this city worth consulting." The mention of her father sent the familiar ache through her chest. 3 months since the funeral. 3 months since she'd inherited this cluttered shop in Brooklyn's industrial quarter, surrounded by her father's tools and the lingering smell of metal shavings and oil. "You knew my dad?" "By reputation only. I regret never meeting him." The stranger extended one pale hand. "Lucian Jericho. And I'm prepared to pay well for your time, regardless of success." His handshake was cool and firm. Elena set the lockbox down and pulled her work lamp closer, studying the mechanism with the jeweler's loop her father had given her for her 18th birthday, 10 years ago now. "This isn't just old," she murmured, tracing the intricate warding patterns etched into the iron. "This is ancient, 15th century, maybe earlier. Where did you get it?" "A family inheritance. The contents are sentimental." Something flickered across Lucian Jericho's refined features. "I can return tomorrow if you need time. Give me until closing, 6 o'clock. Then I'll return at 6. He moved toward the door with that unnatural grace, pausing at the threshold. "Miss Graves, Elena, if I may, I'm grateful you're willing to try." When he left, the shop felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Elena locked the door behind him and returned to her workbench, the lockbox demanding her full attention. Her father had always said that great locks were conversations between creator and keykeeper, questions posed in metal and mechanism. This one asked riddles in a language she barely recognized. The pins were strange arranged, the wards positioned according to principles that defied modern locksmithing logic. She tried her picks, her tension wrenches, every trick Mikhail Graves had taught her during long evenings in this very shop. 4 hours later, oil-stained and frustrated, she finally felt the mechanism surrender. The lock released with a sound like an exhale, and the box opened. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay a single sheet of parchment covered in elegant script she couldn't read, and a wax seal bearing a symbol that made her skin prickle with instinctive unease. A crown above crossed thorns. At precisely 6 o'clock, Lucian Jericho returned. "You actually opened it," he said, and genuine wonder softened his aristocratic features. He lifted the parchment with reverent care, his pale eyes scanning the text. "Remarkable. Your father's skill clearly passed to capable hands. What does it say?" "Nothing that would mean anything without context. A fragment of a much larger document." He folded the parchment carefully and slipped it inside his jacket. "Miss Graves, I have another box, several in fact. Would you be willing to continue this work?" Elena should have said no. Every instinct her father had given her about reading. People said this man carried secrets that could drown her. But the rent was due, and the shop had been bleeding money since her father's illness had consumed their savings. "Same rate? Double it. This project is worth far more to me than mere money can express." Lucian pulled out a sleek black wallet and counted out bills that made Elena's eyes widen. "A deposit. I'll return in 3 days with the second box, if that suits you." 3 days is fine." He paused at the door again, and this time his expression carried something almost vulnerable. "Your father would be proud. The craftsmanship you demonstrated today, very few living souls possess such talent." After he left, Elena counted the money twice, Enough to cover 3 months' rent, enough to breathe again. She didn't let herself question why a man who could afford these fees needed her specifically, or why her hands trembled slightly as she locked up the shop for the night. 3 days later, Lucian Jericho arrived at dusk carrying a second lockbox, this one slightly larger and more ornate than the first. He'd brought coffee this time, 2 cups from the artisanal place, 3 blocks over that Elena never visited because their prices were absurd. "You remembered my order." She accepted the cup, surprised. "You mentioned last time that you survived on black coffee and determination." His eyes glinted with something that might have been humor. "I appreciate determination." The second box took 6 hours. Lucian didn't leave this time. He settled into her father's old reading chair, producing a leather-bound book from his coat, and simply existed in her workspace with that preternatural stillness. Most clients made her nervous, hovering and questioning. His presence felt oddly companionable, like working alongside someone who understood the value of patient silence. "Tell me about your father," he said eventually, not looking up from his book. "If you don't mind the question." Elena manipulated a particularly stubborn pin, feeling the mechanism resist her probing. "What do you want to know?" "What he was like, beyond the reputation." "Brilliant. Obsessive about his work." She smiled despite herself. "He could spend 16 hours on a single lock and forget to eat. My mom used to leave sandwiches by his workbench." "She passed away?" "When I was 12. Car accident." The old grief had worn smooth with time. After that, it was just me and Dad in this shop. He taught me everything said locksmithing was an honest trade, that people trusted you with their security and you owed them precision. He sounds like a man of principle. He was. The lock suddenly gave, and Elena felt the small rush of victory that never got old. "Got it." Lucian set his book aside immediately, moving to the workbench with fluid speed that should have startled her, but somehow didn't. The second box held another parchment fragment, more of that elegant script, another wax seal. "Incredible," he breathed. 2 pieces were actually making progress. Progress toward what, exactly? He looked at her then, really looked, and Elena felt the weight of that pale gaze. "Would you believe me if I said I was trying to restore something precious that was broken long ago?" "That's vague enough to be meaningless." "Yes," he agreed. "It is, but I'm not ready to offer more, not yet. What I can tell you is that your work matters, Elena, more than you know." He paid her again, that same generous sum, and this time he hesitated before leaving. "Would you have dinner with me?" The question came out almost tentative, startling from someone so composed, not as client and locksmith, as 2 people who might enjoy conversation. Elena should have said no. Should have maintained professional boundaries, should have questioned why this wealthy, unnaturally graceful man wanted her company. "There's a Thai place on Atlantic that stays open late," she heard herself say instead. "Best drunken noodles in Brooklyn." Lucian's smile transformed his entire face, warmth breaking through aristocratic reserve. "I would be honored." They walked to the restaurant through October streets painted orange by streetlights, and Elena found herself talking about things she rarely shared: her attempt at art school before returning to save the shop, her father's slow decline, the loneliness of inheriting a family business with no family left to share it. Lucian listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he actually cared about the answers. When their food arrived, he ordered dishes he barely touched, seeming content to watch her eat while they talked. "You're not hungry?" she asked. "I ate before meeting you, but please continue. You were telling me about the Bowery lock emergency." She laughed, recounting the story of the socialite who'd locked herself in her own panic room. Lucian's delighted expression made her feel witty and interesting in ways she'd forgotten she could be. "Your turn," she said eventually. "Tell me something real about Lucian Jericho." He went very still, and she recognized the look of someone choosing words carefully. "I'm older than I appear. I've spent much of my life handling family obligations, political matters that exhaust me. Recently, I've been searching for something lost, something that might finally resolve conflicts that have dragged on far too long." "The boxes." "The boxes," he confirmed, "and I've been fortunate enough that searching for them led me to your door." When he walked her back to the shop, the October night had turned properly cold. Elena unlocked her door. She lived in the apartment above the shop, another inheritance, and found herself reluctant for the evening to end. "Thank you for dinner," Lucian said. "I can't remember the last time I enjoyed someone's company so thoroughly." "We should do it again. After the next box, maybe." "I would like that very much." He reached for her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture so old-fashioned it should have seemed ridiculous. Instead, it felt courtly and right. His lips brushed her knuckles, cool against her skin. On impulse, surprising herself, Elena leaned up and kissed his cheek. Just a quick press of her lips, friendly and grateful, and perhaps the smallest bit curious. Lucian went absolutely motionless. When she pulled back, his eyes had darkened to the color of storm clouds, and he was staring at her like she'd performed magic. "Elena," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a revelation. "Too forward?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "No, not at all. Simply unexpected." He seemed to gather himself with visible effort. "I should go, but I'll return in 3 days with the third box." She watched him disappear into the Brooklyn night, moving with that strange, fluid grace, and wondered what exactly she was getting herself into. The third box arrived right on schedule, and this time Lucian brought wine, a bottle so old and expensive that Elena was afraid to touch it. "This is from a private collection," he explained, pouring deep red liquid into glasses he'd also brought. "I thought we might celebrate progress. We haven't opened the third box yet. Then we'll celebrate your skill." He raised his glass. "To Elena Graves, who accomplishes the impossible with remarkable grace." The wine tasted like dark fruit and something else she couldn't name, complex and rich. Lucian watched her sip with an intensity that should have felt invasive, but instead seemed almost tender. The third box proved the most challenging yet. Hours passed, and Elena's fingers cramped, her eyes burning from the focused work. Lucian brought her water and ibuprofen without being asked, dimmed the harsh overhead lights, and positioned her work lamp perfectly. "You don't have to stay," she told him around midnight. "This could take all night. I have nowhere more important to be. Don't you have family obligations, political matters? Nothing that matters more than this, than being here." Something in his tone made her look up. Lucian stood backlit by the gentle lamp glow, his pale hair almost luminous, and the expression on his aristocratic features was naked with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Lucian, when I first came to your shop," he interrupted gently, "I told myself it was purely practical. You're Mikhail's daughter, the logical choice, but that was a convenient lie even then. What's the truth? The truth is I've spent a very long time being careful, strategic, isolated by necessity and design. And then I met you, and you looked at me like I was simply a man with a problem you could solve. Not a title, not a reputation, just a person." Elena set down her tools, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. "You are just a person. I'm really not." He moved closer, and she could see the conflict in his pale eyes. "There are things I need to tell you, truths that will change how you see me. But I've become selfish, Elena. I want just a little more time before everything becomes complicated." She should have pushed, should have demanded answers. Instead, she stood and crossed the small distance between them, rising on her toes to kiss him properly this time. Lucian made a sound somewhere between surprise and surrender. His arms came around her carefully, like she was something precious and breakable, and he kissed her back with a restrained intensity that suggested vast feeling held barely in check. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers, and he was breathing like he'd forgotten how for a moment. "That's twice now," he murmured. "You're going to ruin me completely." "Maybe I want to. You don't know what you're saying. Then tell me. Help me understand." He pulled back, conflict written across every elegant line of his features. 3 more boxes. Give me until we've finished all 6 pieces, and then I'll tell you everything, I promise. But please, just a little more time." Elena should have pushed harder, should have protected herself better. But she'd spent 3 months drowning in grief and responsibility, and Lucian made her feel alive again in ways she'd forgotten were possible. 3 more boxes, she agreed, but then I want the truth, all of it. You have my word." She returned to the lockbox with renewed focus, and an hour later, The mechanism finally yielded. This parchment fragment was larger, the text more extensive, and when Lucian read it, his entire body went rigid. What is it? The centerpiece, the core agreement. His hands trembled slightly, holding the parchment. I didn't expect to find this so soon. This changes everything. Lucian, you're scaring me. He set the fragment down with reverent care and turned to her, catching her hands in his cool grip. I need you to trust me for just a little longer. Can you do that? Against all logic, Elena nodded. The fourth box came 5 days later, and Lucian looked different, tension radiating from his normally composed frame, shadows under his pale eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Are you all right? Elena asked as he set the ornate container on her workbench. Honestly? No, but being here helps. He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Seeing you helps? They'd fallen into a pattern over the past weeks. She would work on the lock while he kept her company, and afterward they'd share meals, long walks through Brooklyn's autumn streets, conversations that stretched until dawn. Elena had learned that Lucian loved classical music and obscure poetry, that he carried the weight of family expectations like physical burden, that he watched her with an intensity suggesting she was the most fascinating person he'd ever encountered. She'd also noticed things that should have concerned her more than they did. The way he never ate real meals, only sipping wine or coffee. How he seemed stronger and more energized after dark. The fact that his skin was always cool to touch, that he moved with inhuman grace, that sometimes his eyes caught light like an animal's. Elena wasn't stupid. She'd grown up in New York, read her share of fiction, noticed patterns. But knowing and accepting were different things, and she wasn't quite ready to voice the impossible conclusion taking shape in her mind. The fourth box resisted her efforts for hours. Lucian paced this time, unable to maintain his usual stillness, and his agitation was infectious. What's wrong? She asked finally, setting down her tools. And don't say nothing. You've been wound tight since you arrived. He stopped pacing, running one hand through his pale hair in a gesture of pure frustration. I received word yesterday. Others are looking for these boxes, Elena, others who don't want them found. Why? Because what they contain is dangerous, powerful. It represents agreements that certain parties would prefer stayed broken. And you? Why do you want them? Because I'm tired of conflict, because I believe in the promises these documents represent, because... He broke off, looking at her with desperate intensity. Because I want to live in a world where I can keep you safe, and right now I can't guarantee that. Elena stood, crossing to him. I'm not fragile, Lucian. I don't need you to protect me from information. Don't you? He caught her arms gently, his grip careful despite obvious emotion. Your father knew these secrets. Did that knowledge keep him safe? The words landed like a physical blow. What are you talking about? Lucian closed his eyes, jaw clenched. I've said too much. Please, just help me finish this. Then everything will make sense. My father died of pneumonia. It was sudden, but... Elena, please, I can't do this yet. Just finish the box and then we'll talk. I swear it. She wanted to push, to demand answers immediately, but the raw emotion in Lucian's voice stopped her. Instead, she returned to the lockbox with shaking hands, anger and fear lending sharp focus to her work. The fourth box opened just after midnight. This parchment showed signatures, dozens of them, flowing script names that seemed to shimmer in the lamplight. The witness page, Lucian breathed. We're so close now. Elena barely heard him. Her mind was still caught on his earlier words, on implications she didn't want to examine. Take it and go. I need space to think. Elena, please, just go. He left without argument, and Elena sat alone in her father's shop, surrounded by tools and memories, trying to make sense of pieces that didn't quite fit. 2 days passed before Lucian returned. Elena had spent those days reviewing her father's final weeks, pulling up medical records, questioning her own memories. Pneumonia, the doctors had said, a sudden infection, too aggressive to fight. But her father had been healthy before that, careful about his health, and in his final days, feverish and fading, he'd said strange things, warnings about locks that should stay closed, about promises that outlived their makers. She'd thought it was delirium. Now she wasn't sure. When Lucian entered the shop at dusk, Elena had the fifth box already on her workbench delivered by courier that morning with a note in his elegant handwriting. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. This one matters most. You've been crying, he said quietly, and the concern in his voice nearly broke her composure. Tell me about my father, the truth this time. Lucian removed his coat slowly, moving with careful deliberation, and settled into the reading chair. In the fading October light, his unnatural pallor seemed more pronounced, the aristocratic angles of his face too perfect to be entirely human. Your father was a great man, he began. 20 years ago, he was approached by representatives of my people, my court, and asked to create 6 locks, each a masterwork, to seal away the pieces of a treaty. A very important treaty, binding agreements between factions that had been at war for centuries. Your people. Yes, Lucian met her eyes steadily. I am what you've likely already guessed, Elena, what your scientific mind has been trying to rationalize away. I am vampire. More specifically, I am king of the Eastern Court, one of 2 major factions that govern our kind in this region of the world. Elena should have felt shock, fear. Instead, there was almost relief in having suspicions confirmed. And this treaty? A peace accord. 20 years ago, after conflicts that had consumed both our courts for more than 2 centuries, we finally negotiated terms. But the treaty was dangerous. It contained truths, concessions, admissions that certain parties didn't want preserved. So it was divided, sealed away in locks created by a human locksmith of exceptional skill. My father, your father, who was paid very well, given assurances of safety, and told to forget he'd ever been involved. Lucian's expression darkened. 3 months ago, members of the rival court, the Western faction, decided they wanted the treaty destroyed rather than fulfilled. They tracked down Elena Graves. The shop seemed to tilt around Elena. You're saying my father was murdered. I'm saying he was infected with something that appeared natural, that no human doctor would question. And I'm saying he died protecting secrets he'd kept for 20 years, refusing to reveal where he'd hidden the boxes even under duress. But you found them? Eventually. It took our archivists months to trace his network, to discover he'd sold them through antiquities dealers, scattered them deliberately to make them harder to locate. Lucian stood, moving toward her slowly. I came to your shop because you're his daughter, yes, because you inherited his skill, but also because I thought you deserved to finish what he started, to complete his work, and be credited for protecting something that matters. Elena's hands clenched into fists. And you didn't think to mention that opening these boxes might get me killed too? I have guards on you, 24-hour surveillance you've never noticed. The moment I realized the Western Court was actively searching, I made absolutely certain you were protected. His voice dropped to something almost pleading. I would never let anyone harm you, Elena. I would burn my own kingdom down before allowing that. You don't get to make those decisions for me. You're right, I don't. But I'm a selfish creature, and I couldn't bear the thought of walking away, not from this project, not from you. Elena turned back to the 5th box, emotions churning too complicated to name. Anger at being deceived, fear of the danger he'd described, but underneath it all, a stubborn certainty that she trusted this impossible man despite every reason not to. How many guards? 6, rotating shifts, 3 outside, 3 positioned on nearby rooftops. And they're like you? Vampires? Yes. Loyal to me personally, under orders to protect you at any cost. She picked up her tools, hands steadier than she felt. Then I guess I'd better finish this. For my father. Relief flooded Lucian's features. Elena, don't just let me work. The 5th box was a nightmare of complexity, mechanisms within mechanisms, wards designed to destroy the contents if forced. Elena worked with meticulous care, aware of Lucian's presence behind her, his stillness somehow comforting despite the revelations of the past hour. Hours passed. At some point, Lucian brought her tea and she accepted it without speaking. The silence between them felt fragile, full of things unsaid. Finally, near dawn, the 5th lock surrendered. The box opened to reveal the largest parchment fragment yet, covered in dense text and elaborate seals. The terms themselves, Lucian said quietly. The actual peace conditions. This is what they wanted destroyed. Elena turned to face him, exhausted and emotionally raw. What happens when we find the last piece? The treaty can be ratified, officially recognized by both courts, binding and enforceable. It will mean security, stability, an end to conflicts that have killed thousands over the centuries. And the people who murdered my father? Something dangerous flickered in Lucian's pale eyes. They will face justice. I promise you that. Elena crossed the space between them, driven by impulse and emotion she couldn't contain anymore. She pulled him down and kissed him fiercely, pouring anger and grief and impossible affection into the contact. Lucian responded instantly, his careful control fracturing. He kissed her back with intensity that felt barely restrained, his arms tight around her, and when they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "That's twice on our dates," he said roughly. "Are you trying to destroy me?" "Maybe I'm trying to figure out if you're real, if any of this is real." "I'm real. This is real." He caught her face in his cool hands. "And I am falling for you in ways that terrify me, because the last human who got close to these secrets died, and I will not lose you the same way." "Then help me finish this. Find the last box, complete the treaty, and make the people who killed my father answer for it." "Elena Graves," Lucian said softly, "you are extraordinary, brave and brilliant, and so goddamn stubborn. Has anyone ever told you that?" "My father, constantly. He raised you well." The last box took 3 weeks to locate. Lucian's people traced it to a private collector in Boston who'd purchased it at auction years ago, unaware of its significance. Negotiations were delicate, and Lucian refused to let Elena accompany him north for the retrieval. "The Western Court knows we're close," he explained during one of his nightly visits. They'd fallen into a pattern. He would arrive at her shop after sunset, and they'd share hours talking, planning, existing in each other's presence. "They're getting desperate. I won't risk you in the open like that." Elena had met some of his guards by now, stern-faced vampires who watched the shop with predatory alertness. It should have frightened her more than it did. Instead, she found odd comfort in knowing Lucian had met his promise to protect her. She'd done research too during the long days when Lucian couldn't visit because of his court obligations. Vampire lore, modern accounts from people who claimed encounters. Most of it was nonsense, but some rang true. The aversion to sunlight, the need for blood, the ancient political structures that governed their hidden societies. "Do you kill people?" she asked one night, the question emerging blunt and sudden. "To feed, I mean." Lucian didn't flinch from it. "No, my court maintains agreements with blood banks, hospital networks. We pay very well for clean sources, and we police our people strictly. Anyone who kills faces immediate execution." "But you could kill someone if you wanted." "Yes, we're predators, Elena. That doesn't change just because we choose civilization over savagery. But choosing matters, discipline matters, being better than our worst instincts matters. And the people who killed my father? They broke our oldest laws, harming humans outside sanctioned protocols, threatening the secrecy that protects us all. When this is finished, they'll face trial before both courts. I want to be there, when they answer for what they did." Lucian studied her for a long moment. "That would mean entering my world fully, seeing things that would change how you understand reality. There's no going back from that knowledge, Elena. I crossed that line the moment I kissed you the first time. We both know it." His expression softened into something achingly tender. "Yes, we did." The 6th box arrived by armored car, and Lucian brought his full guard complement 12 vampires who surrounded Elena's shop with military precision. The tension was palpable, danger electric in the autumn air. "They'll try to stop us tonight," Lucian said, checking the reinforced locks on the shop doors. "The moment they realize we have all 6 pieces, they'll make their move. So we finish this fast. So we finish this correctly." He turned to her, and the weight of his authority was visible for the first time. This was the Vampire King, not just the man who brought her coffee and listened to her stories. "Elena, if I tell you to run, you run. No questions, no arguments. My people will protect you." "And leave you to fight alone?" "Absolutely not. I've survived 2 centuries of political maneuvering and open conflicts. I can handle a rival faction's desperation. Maybe I'm not willing to risk that. Maybe you matter to me too. Lucian crossed to her in one fluid movement, pulling her against him with careful intensity. "When this is over," he said quietly, "I'm going to ask you something important, and I very much hope you'll say yes. But first, we finish your father's work." The sixth box was a masterpiece, the culmination of Elena Graves' skill. Elena approached it with reverence and determination, aware of Lucian watching her every movement, of the guards positioned throughout the shop, of the danger gathering in the October darkness outside. She worked in focused silence, every skill her father had taught her brought to bear on this final challenge. The lock was beautiful, complex, a conversation between her father's genius and her own hard-won expertise. 2 hours in, glass shattered upstairs. "They're in the building," one of the guards announced, his voice sharp with tension. "Hold positions," Lucian ordered. "Nothing reaches this room." Elena forced her hands to stay steady, her focus to remain absolute. She could hear sounds of conflict above crashes, shouts, inhuman speed meeting inhuman strength. Her heart hammered, but she didn't stop working. "Elena," Lucian said softly, and she glanced up to see him watching her with profound emotion. "Whatever happens, know that meeting you has been the greatest gift of my very long life. Tell me that when this is over, not before." The lock clicked. Once, twice, a cascade of internal mechanisms releasing. The sixth box opened, and Elena pulled out the final parchment fragment with shaking hands. "We have it," Lucian breathed. "All 6 pieces." The sounds of fighting stopped abruptly. Footsteps descended the stairs, measured, deliberate, wrong. 3 vampires entered the shop, and Elena knew immediately they weren't Lucian's people. They had the same pale beauty, the same predatory grace, but their eyes held cruelty that Lucian's lacked. "Lucian Jericho," the lead vampire said, his voice smooth and cold. "Still clinging to your pathetic peace treaty. Some of us prefer the old ways." "Marcus," Lucian moved to position himself between Elena and the intruders. "The Western Court sent their lapdog. I'm almost insulted they didn't come themselves." "Oh, they'll come. To your trial, after we've eliminated the locksmith and destroyed those documents. You killed my father." Elena's voice emerged steady despite her fear. 20 years of keeping silent, and you murdered him." Marcus's attention shifted to her, and his expression held casual cruelty. The old man was stubborn, refused every inducement, every threat. Eventually, we grew tired of asking nicely. Lucian's entire bearing changed, rage transmuting him into something terrifying and ancient. "You just confessed before witnesses. Your own court can't protect you from that." "What witnesses? Your guards are dead or dying upstairs, and you've grown soft." "Lucian, weakened by your human pet, everything happened too fast to track." Marcus lunged, inhuman speed propelling him toward Elena. Lucian intercepted, and the 2 vampires collided with force that cracked the floorboards. The other 2 intruders moved to join the fight. Elena grabbed the nearest heavy object, one of her father's antique forging hammers, and swung hard when one of Marcus's companions got too close. The blow connected with his temple, and vampire or not, physics still applied. He staggered, and Lucian used the distraction to snap his neck with brutal efficiency. The fight was savage and quick. Lucian moved like violence incarnate, protecting Elena while dismantling his opponents with centuries of combat experience. When Marcus tried again to reach her, Lucian simply tore out his throat. The last intruder fled, crashing through the shop's front window into the October night. Silence fell, broken only by harsh breathing Elena's, because Lucian didn't need to breathe except by habit. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the gash across his ribs where something sharp had caught him. "I'll heal. Are you all right?" Elena looked at the carnage in her father's shop, at the vampire corpses already decomposing into ash, at the 6 parchment fragments laid carefully on her workbench. "I'm fine, but we need to finish this before more come." Lucian pulled out his phone, speaking rapid commands in a language Elena didn't recognize. Within minutes, more vampires arrived, his people, loyal guards who'd fought their way through Marcus's ambush upstairs. "Assemble the council," Lucian ordered. "Both courts, emergency session. We have all 6 fragments and a confession to oath-breaking and murder. This ends tonight." They traveled to what Lucian called the Court Hall, a massive space beneath Manhattan that Elena never would have known existed. Ancient architecture met modern security, and the chamber itself was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings, intricate stonework, rows of seats filled with pale, beautiful, terrifying vampires. Elena stood at Lucian's side, the 6 parchment fragments arranged before them on an ornate table. She'd pieced them together in the car during the drive, her locksmith's precision allowing her to see how the torn edges aligned perfectly. "This is unprecedented," an elderly vampire announced from the high seat, bringing a human before the assembled courts. "This human is Elena Graves's daughter," Lucian replied, his voice carrying authority that silenced objections. "She completed her father's work. She deserves to witness its conclusion." Another vampire, a woman with white hair elaborately braided, stood from the Western Court section. "The locksmith interfered with court business. She should face trial herself." "The locksmith," Lucian said coldly, "was hired to open boxes she believed were simple antiques. She learned the truth only after Marcus and his conspirators murdered her father for protecting these very documents, a murder he confessed to before witnesses less than an hour ago." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Elena held her ground, refusing to show fear even surrounded by hundreds of predators. The trial proceeded with formal efficiency. Lucian's guards testified about the attack, about Marcus's confession. The surviving intruder was brought in chains and corroborated the account under oath binding that Elena was assured made lying impossible. The Western Court leadership looked genuinely shocked. "We authorized no such action," their spokesman declared. "If Marcus acted against the locksmith, he violated our explicit commands." "Then you agree he should face your harshest sanctions?" "He should face execution." And he would, had your people not already dispensed justice. The elderly vampire in the high seat raised one hand for silence. "The matter of Marcus's conspiracy is settled. Now we address the treaty itself. All 6 fragments are recovered," Lucian gestured to the assembled parchments, "complete and intact, thanks to Elena Graves's exceptional skill. Then let it be read." What followed was hours of dense legal language, terms negotiated 20 years ago outlining territorial boundaries, feeding protocols, human interaction limitations, and dispute resolution procedures. It was simultaneously boring and profound, the careful architecture of peace built between factions that had considered each other enemies for centuries. When the reading finished, both courts voted. The treaty was ratified unanimously, binding both sides to terms that would reshape their world. "There remains the matter of the locksmith herself," the high-seat vampire said. "She possesses dangerous knowledge now." Elena felt Lucian tense beside her. Before he could speak, she stepped forward. "I possess the knowledge my father died protecting," she said clearly. "I know what these documents mean, and I understand the importance of the peace they represent. I'm not a threat to your people. I'm simply someone who wanted to finish my father's work and see justice for his murder." The white-haired woman studied her with ancient eyes. "And if we offered you a position? Official locksmith to both courts, keeper of the seals, maintainer of these treaties?" Lucian's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "I would accept," Elena said, "on the condition that my father's name is cleared completely, that his death is acknowledged officially as murder, and that his shop is recognized as the seat of this position." "Agreed. The shop will be designated neutral ground, protected by both courts." The formal session concluded, and vampires dispersed in clusters of political conversation. Lucian pulled Elena into a quieter corridor, his expression carrying relief and pride and barely restrained emotion. "You were magnificent," he said, "brave and brilliant and perfect. I just did what made sense. You claimed a position of power before they could decide your fate. You protected yourself and honored your father. That's more than sense, Elena. That's wisdom." She leaned against him, exhaustion finally hitting. "Is it over? Really over?" "The immediate danger, yes. The treaty is ratified. Marcus's conspiracy exposed. Your position secured. But—" he paused and nervousness crossed his features. "I told you I would ask you something important when this was finished." "I remember." Lucian pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. "I've lived a very long time. Centuries of political maneuvering, strategic relationships, careful isolation. I thought I understood what I wanted from existence, and then I met you, and suddenly everything I'd accepted about my life seemed insufficient." "Lucian." Let me finish. Please. He caught her hands in his cool grip. You kissed me once. Casual and kind. Kissed me twice, fierce and certain. By the third time, I was already hopelessly yours in ways I didn't fully understand. And now, knowing your courage, your brilliance, the way you honor your father's memory, I can't imagine my future without you in it. Elena's heart was doing complicated gymnastics in her chest. What are you asking? Move into my world fully, not just as the seal keeper, but as my partner. Let me court you properly, by both human and vampire custom. Let me show you everything I can offer: protection, devotion, time beyond what mortals usually have. You're offering to turn me. Eventually, if you wanted, but not immediately. That's a decision that deserves time and certainty. For now, I'm simply asking if you'll let me love you. If you'll give us a real chance. Elena thought about the past months. The grief of losing her father, the loneliness of the shop, the weight of inheritance and responsibility. And then Lucian walking through her door, bringing mystery and danger and connection she'd stopped believing she'd find. I'm still human, she said carefully. I'll age. I'll need things you don't: food, sleep, sunlight. I know. And I'll learn to navigate that. We'll figure it out together. Your court might not approve. My court has no say in my personal life. I'm king, not their puppet. And if I want to keep running the shop? Keep living in Brooklyn instead of some vampire castle? Lucian's expression softened into pure affection. Then I'll buy the building next door and install light-blocking shutters. I'll adapt, Elena. For you, I'll adapt to anything. She kissed him then, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Lucian made a sound of pure relief, pulling her closer, and kissed her back with intensity that suggested he'd been terrified she might refuse. When they finally broke apart, Elena was grinning. That's 3 times now, on our 3rd major date. I think that makes you officially mine. I was yours the moment you opened the first box, Lucian admitted. Everything after that was just me slowly realizing it. The following weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. Elena's shop was officially designated neutral ground, with a plaque outside declaring it the seat of the seal keeper. Both courts contributed to renovations, reinforced security, a proper archive room for the treaty documents, even a small apartment expansion so she'd have more living space. Lucian was a constant presence, arriving each evening after sunset and staying until near dawn. They navigated the peculiarities of their situation with surprising ease. He learned to keep her kitchen stocked with food he'd never eat. She learned which conversations required privacy from even vampire hearing. She met his inner circle properly, advisors who'd served him for decades, guards who protected him with fierce loyalty, even a few vampires who'd known her father and spoke of his skill with genuine respect. He was offered immortality, one ancient vampire told her during a formal dinner. After creating the locks, we wanted to keep him close to preserve his genius, but he refused, said he had a daughter to raise and a human life he loved. The information settled something in Elena's chest. Her father had chosen his path knowing the alternatives. He'd died protecting work he believed in, killed by people who'd now faced justice. 6 months after the treaty's ratification, both courts held a formal ceremony. Elena stood in the great hall, dressed in formal attire. Lucian had insisted on providing midnight blue silk that made her feel elegant and powerful, while the assembled vampires recognized her father's contribution posthumously. Elena Graves gave his life-protecting peace he'd helped preserve, the high-seat vampire declared. His daughter completes his legacy. Let no vampire forget the debt we owe their family. They unveiled a portrait of her father, painted from photographs to hang in the hall's gallery of honored humans. Elena cried, not caring who saw, and Lucian's arm around her shoulders was the only thing keeping her grounded. Afterward, there was celebration elaborate in ways that still sometimes overwhelmed her. Vampires from both courts approached to offer respect, to share stories of conflicts ended by the treaty's terms, to thank her for finishing what her father started. Tired? Lucian asked eventually, reading her expression with the ease of growing familiarity. A little, but happy. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her to a smaller chamber off the main hall, private and quiet. Inside stood a desk, her father's desk from the shop, which she'd assumed was in storage. "I had it brought here," Lucian explained, "because this room is now officially yours, your workspace when you're conducting court business. But I thought you should have something of his, something familiar." Elena ran her hands over the scarred wood, remembering countless hours watching her father work at this very desk. "Thank you, this is perfect." Lucian produced a small box, not an antique lockbox this time, but modern velvet. "I have something else, if you're ready." He opened it to reveal a ring elegant in its simplicity, a deep red stone she suspected was far more valuable than it appeared, set in platinum. "I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet. We've only been doing this 6 months, and you deserve proper time to be certain. But this is a promise, a pledge that I'm committed to this, to us, for as long as you'll have me." Elena took the ring, sliding it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Did you have this sized? I may have stolen one of your other rings temporarily to ensure accuracy." "Sneaky vampire king." "You're sneaky vampire king?" He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "So? Will you accept my promise?" "On one condition." "Anything." "When you do eventually propose, and I'm not saying rush, but when you do, make it somewhere meaningful, not in some grand hall or public spectacle, somewhere that matters to us." Lucian's expression melted into pure tenderness. "I can do that." They stayed in that quiet room for hours, making plans and sharing hopes, navigating the strange, beautiful complexity of their joined lives. Elena told him about commissions she'd taken, a high-security vault for a paranoid CEO, custom lockwork for a museum installation. He told her about court politics, about the slow work of implementing treaty terms, about challenges that arose when factions who'd been enemies learned to cooperate. "Do you regret it?" Lucian asked eventually. "Everything that's changed since I walked into your shop?" Elena considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she'd been drowning in grief, isolated in her father's business, certain she understood the limits of her world. Now, she was the official sealkeeper to vampire courts, in love with an immortal king, navigating realities she'd never imagined existed. "I regret that my father died protecting these secrets," she said honestly. "I regret that I didn't get more time with him, that he felt he had to face those dangers alone. But everything else? Meeting you, finishing his work, finding purpose again? No, I don't regret any of that. He would be proud of you. I wish I could have told him that. I think he knew. In his own way, he prepared me for this, taught me to be stubborn and brave and precise, all the things I needed to survive this world." Lucian kissed her then, slow and sweet, and Elena let herself sink into the certainty that this strange, impossible love was real. A year after opening the first lockbox, Elena stood in her shop, transformed now, but still fundamentally the same space her father had built, and surveyed the newest commission, an elaborate puzzle box from the Eastern Court designed to hold something precious, requiring her unique skills to open. She'd taken on apprentices, 2 young humans interested in the craft who didn't mind the unusual clientele their teacher served. They worked in the back room now, practicing techniques Elena Graves had perfected. The bell above the door chimed, and Lucian entered with his characteristic grace. He'd grown even more comfortable in the shop over the past year, treating it like a second home. "Busy day?" he asked, kissing her cheek in greeting. "Productive. I finished the museum commission and started this new puzzle box. How were court sessions?" "Tedious but necessary. The Western Court is pushing back on some territorial terms again, but we'll resolve it." He studied her expression. "You look pleased about something." Elena pulled a folder from her desk drawer, documents she'd been reviewing all week. "I've been thinking about your promise ring, about the future." Lucian went very still, the predatory focus that meant she had his complete attention. And I think I'm ready to talk seriously about immortality, not immediately, but in the next year or two. I want to learn more, understand the process, make an informed decision." "Elena, let me finish. I've watched how you live, how your people navigate centuries instead of decades. I've seen the work the treaty enables, the peace it maintains, and I've realized I want to be part of that long term. I want time with you. Real time, not just the brief span a human life offers." Lucian caught her hands and his grip was trembling. "You're certain? This isn't a decision to make lightly." "I know. That's why I'm saying in a year or two, not tomorrow. I want to live as a human a bit longer, experience sunlight and aging and all the things I'll be giving up, but I also want forever with you, and I'm not willing to sacrifice that for fear. You are extraordinary. Do you know that? Brave beyond measure. I'm practical, and I love you. Those two facts make the decision relatively simple. Lucian kissed her thoroughly, and she could feel the emotion in it, relief and joy and fierce devotion. When they broke apart, he was actually grinning. In that case, he said, I have a question. Already? I said a year or two before turning, not marriage. This is separate, although... He pulled her toward the shop's front door. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. They walked through Brooklyn's spring evening, the city alive with warmth and possibility. Lucian led her to a small park near the waterfront, a quiet space she'd mentioned once as one of her favorite spots when she needed to think. Meaningful place, he said. Somewhere that matters to us. You specified that as a condition. Elena's heart started pounding. Lucian, he knelt right there on the grass, producing a different ring, still elegant, still simple, but this one clearly meant for permanence. Elena Graves, you've given me more than I knew to hope for. Purpose beyond politics, connection beyond strategy, love I thought I was too old and cynical to feel. Will you marry me? Will you let me stand beside you for all the years you'll give me, human or immortal, here in your Brooklyn or in my courts or anywhere in between? Elena pulled him to his feet because watching a king kneel felt wrong, and kissed him with everything she felt. Yes, obviously yes. Obviously? He was laughing now, sliding the engagement ring onto her finger next to the promise ring. You made me nervous for months about those conditions. I wanted you to mean it, to think about what you were offering. I've thought about nothing else since the day you kissed me the first time and made me realize I was in serious trouble. They stayed in the park until late, making plans and dreaming futures, a wedding ceremony that would blend human and vampire traditions, her gradual introduction to the full scope of court politics, the eventual transformation that would grant her centuries instead of decades. Will I lose myself? She asked eventually. When you turn me? Will I still be me? You'll change, Lucian admitted. The transformation affects everyone differently. But your core, your brilliance, your stubborn courage, your father's legacy in your hands and heart, that doesn't fade. If anything, it crystallizes. You'll be more yourself, not less. And you'll be there? Through the whole process? Every moment. I promise. 2 years later, Elena stood in the same court hall where the treaty had been ratified, wearing white silk and surrounded by vampires and the handful of humans she'd trusted with the truth. Lucian waited at the altar in formal attire that made him look even more regal than usual, and when she joined him, his expression held wonder that made her feel beautiful and chosen and deeply loved. The ceremony blended traditions, human vows and vampire bonds, promises made in English and the old language Lucian's people still used for formal occasions. When the high-seat vampire declared them married before both worlds, the assembled crowd erupted in applause that echoed off ancient stone. My wife, Lucian murmured, kissing her thoroughly despite the audience. My brilliant, impossible wife. Your wife who's going to drag you into Brooklyn sunlight every chance she gets before she loses that ability. I'll endure anything for you, even daylight. The reception was elaborate and joyful, vampires dancing with humans under careful supervision, both courts celebrating a union that represented continued peace and cooperation. Elena's apprentices were there, wide-eyed at the grandeur. Friends from her human life mixed with Lucian's ancient advisors, finding common ground in stories and laughter. Late in the evening, the white-haired vampire from the Western Court approached Elena with a small box. A wedding gift, she explained, from both courts jointly. We thought it appropriate. Inside lay a master key, ornate and clearly ancient, marked with the seals of both vampire factions. This opens every lock in both court halls, the vampire explained. It's traditionally held by the reigning monarchs, but we thought the seal keeper should have one as well. You've earned the trust that represents. Elena accepted it with appropriate gravity, understanding the symbolism. She was being given access to spaces, secrets, power that even most vampires never touched. I'll honor this trust, she promised. We know. Your father did, and you've proven yourself his worthy successor. When the celebration finally wound down, Lucian pulled Elena away to their private quarters, a suite in the court hall's residential wing that they'd decorated together, blending her modern aesthetic with his appreciation for historical pieces. "Happy?" he asked, helping her out of the elaborate wedding dress. "Deliriously, though my feet hurt from dancing. Vampire stamina will help with that. Eventually." They'd planned the transformation for after the wedding, giving Elena time to fully embrace her human life's end on her own terms. In 3 days, she would undergo the change that would make her immortal, give her centuries with the man she loved. "Are you nervous?" Lucian asked, reading her expression. "About the transformation?" "A little, mostly excited though, ready for the next phase." He pulled her close, and they stood together in comfortable silence, two beings from different worlds who'd found unexpected harmony. 3 days later, surrounded by Lucian's most trusted people and the medical experts who would monitor the process, Elena underwent the transformation. It was painful agony that rewrote her biology at a cellular level, but Lucian stayed with her through every moment, his voice a constant anchor in the chaos. When she emerged 3 days after that, the world looked different. Sharper, more vivid, alive with details her human eyes had never caught. She could hear heartbeats blocks away, smell individual scents in complex layers, feel strength in her limbs that seemed impossible. "How do you feel?" Lucian asked, watching her with careful attention. Elena tested her new abilities, the speed, the strength, the heightened senses. Then she turned to him and grinned. "Like I could take on the world. Like I finally understand what you've been experiencing for centuries. Like myself, but more. You're beautiful. You were always beautiful, but now—" He touched her face with something like reverence. "Now you're eternal. We have time, Elena. Real time." They spent weeks helping her adjust, learning to control new instincts, to navigate the world with vampire senses, to manage the hunger that came with their nature. Lucian arranged for ethical blood sources and taught her the discipline his court prided itself on. Elena discovered that her locksmith's precision translated well to vampire control. The same focus that let her manipulate tiny mechanisms now helped her regulate strength and speed. Within months, she was functioning normally still herself, but enhanced in ways that felt right. Her shop remained her anchor. She still took commissions, still taught her apprentices, still maintained the sealkeeper's office. But now she could work night shifts without exhaustion, could perceive lock mechanisms with even greater clarity, could offer her services to vampire clients without the barriers daylight had once created. 5 years after the transformation, Elena and Lucian stood together in her shop, their shop now, really, since he'd invested in expansions and improvements. The space had grown to include a proper gallery for historical locks, an archive for vampire court documents, and training rooms for her growing roster of apprentices. "Do you ever miss it?" Lucian asked, watching her work on a particularly complex commission. "The human life? Sunlight?" Elena considered the question honestly. She did miss some things: the warmth of the sun on her skin, the simple pleasure of a good meal, the easy normalcy of her old existence. But she'd gained so much more. Centuries stretching ahead with the man she loved, work that mattered on a scale she'd never imagined, the ability to truly finish what her father started, to be not just the sealkeeper, but an active participant in maintaining peace between worlds. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I'd make the same choice again, every time." Lucian crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I love you, more than I knew I could love anyone. You saved me, you know, from a life of political maneuvering and isolation. You made me remember what joy feels like. You saved me too, from grief and loneliness and a future that felt small and constrained." They kissed, and Elena marveled at how natural it still felt, how right. 5 years married, 7 years since he'd first walked through her door with an impossible lockbox, a blink in the span of centuries they'd have together. "Come on," Lucian said eventually. "The council meeting starts in an hour, and they'll complain if we're late again." "Let them complain. I'm the sealkeeper. I'll arrive when I'm ready." His delighted laugh filled the shop, her father's shop, her shop, their shop, and Elena thought that maybe this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not simple, but real and hard-won and worth every complicated moment. 20 years after Elena opened that first lockbox, the shop in Brooklyn had become legendary. Vampires and humans alike brought their most challenging locks to the seal keeper and her apprentices. The treaty her father had died protecting remained strong, expanded now to include provisions Elena herself had helped negotiate. She and Lucian split their time between the shop and the court halls, between Brooklyn's industrial streets and the hidden chambers beneath Manhattan. They'd become a partnership that both worlds respected his political acumen and her practical brilliance, combining to maintain peace and solve problems that had seemed intractable. On the anniversary of their first meeting, they stood together in the shop as evening settled over the city. Elena had locked up early, sending her apprentices home, wanting this time private. 20 years, Lucian mused, the blink of an eye for our kind, and yet it feels like I've known you forever. Centuries to go, Elena reminded him. Think you can tolerate me that long? I think I'll manage, somehow, with tremendous sacrifice and dedication. She threw a cleaning rag at him, laughing. Dramatic vampire king. Your dramatic vampire king. They settled into comfortable chairs, her father's reading chair, and one Lucian had added years ago, and simply existed together. Outside, Brooklyn moved through its eternal rhythm. Inside, two beings from different worlds had built something lasting. Elena thought about the young woman she'd been, drowning in grief, certain her life had shrunk to the boundaries of this inherited shop. She thought about her father, who'd protected secrets that killed him, who'd raised her to be brave and stubborn and precise. She thought about Lucian, walking through her door with an antique lockbox and changing everything. About 3 kisses on 3 dates that had sealed her fate as surely as any lock. About the moment she'd realized she was hopelessly his, just as he'd become hopelessly hers. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For the lockboxes, for the mystery, for being patient while I figured out I loved you, for giving me purpose again. Lucian reached across the space between their chairs, catching her hand. Thank you for opening that first box, for being brave enough to finish it, for choosing me, choosing this life, despite all the complications. Best decision I ever made. Second best, he corrected. The best was kissing me that first time. Everything else just followed inevitably from there. Elena laughed, and the sound filled the shop her father had built, the space she'd preserved, the home she'd made with her impossible vampire king. Outside, the city moved through another night. Inside, two people who'd found each other against all odds settled into the comfortable certainty of love that would last centuries. The lockboxes were empty now, their secrets revealed and transformed into lasting peace. But Elena's work continued, each commission a new puzzle, each day with Lucian another gift. They had time, real time, stretches of years that defied mortal comprehension. And they had each other, the locksmith and the king, the seal keeper and the vampire. Two people from different worlds who'd built a bridge between them, one kiss, one lock, one choice at a time. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything.